Elsa Schiaparelli was an Italian designer who was known for her avant-garde and surrealist look in the era between the two world wars. Her line of perfumes, including the most famous, Shocking, it is a pretty shocking bottle, are iconic. She was also the main rival of Coco Chanel, but unlike Chanel, not a Nazi. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch my playlist on the history of Chanel No. 5. But Schiaparelli, or Scap as she was known to her friends and family, had quite the life story. Her mother was an Italian noble and her father was a scholar. And a side note that is for my friend Annalise the archaeologist only, apparently her father's cousin discovered the tomb of Nefertari. But Scap wrote a book of poetry that was so shocking that her family sent her to a convent in Switzerland. She hated that, so then she went on a hunger strike until they let her come back home. But overall, she didn't like the aristocratic lifestyle. And when her family wanted her to marry a rich Russian man, she pieced out to London where she became a nanny. She then met William Frederick von de Kerler, basically a con man, and earned his living by claiming to be a psychic. They married when she was 23, and she basically became his assistant. They lived in England and Paris before moving to New York, mostly outrunning the law because it was illegal to practice as a psychic in England at the time. After the birth of her daughter, though, he abandoned them, which was probably for the best. Scap didn't want to go back home, though, so instead she moved to Paris. During her time in America, she became close with Gabrielle Picabia, who was the wife of a surrealist painter. Gabby introduced Scap to a group of famous artists, including Marcel Duchamp and Salvador Dali. Scap was super into it. Once in Paris, she was trying to figure out how she could support herself and her child. And she didn't want to take money from her parents because she was afraid that they would marry someone of their choosing and go back to the aristocratic lifestyle. She was making her own clothes, and her friends were like, hey, you should do that. And I should note here that Scap did not know how to sew. She made her clothing by draping, and that was something that Coco Chanel hated about her. Chanel called Scap that Italian artist who makes clothes. And for her part, Scap called Chanel the hat maker. Anyway, her line of sweaters was actually featured in Vogue, and then it was just off to the races for her brand. She's also credited with creating the divided skirt, which was a precursor to shorts, and she was one of the first fashion designers to do the wrap dress. She was also known for her love of magenta, and this color pink actually became known as Shocking Pink. And you can see it on one of her perfume boxes, which I'll show you in another video. Okay, I'm running out of time, but in part 2, we'll talk about her collaboration with Salvador Dali, her famous clients, her rivalry with Chanel, and of course, her perfumes. Here's a little sneak peek. Stay tuned.